The boss told an elderly woman to play the piano to humiliate her, but he didn't expect what happened next. Margaret Wilson carefully arranged her gray hair in the small mirror of her compact duel, her weathered hands moving with practiced precision. At 68, she was the oldest employee at Horizon Financial Group's downtown Chicago office. The autumn rain pattered against the windows of the break room as she prepared for another day of answering phones and filing documents. For Margaret, "Don't forget the staff meeting at 10, reminded Tricia, a young receptionist who'd always been kind to her. "Thank you, dear," Margaret smiled, tucking her compact back into her purse. The company had changed dramatically in the past year. When Gregory Thompson became the new CEO, he'd made it clear he wanted to modernize the workforce. Margaret had overheard him discussing early retirement packages with HR. She knew what that meant. They wanted her gone. In the conference room, Margaret took a seat in the back corner. The sleek glass table was packed with employees, most young enough to be her grandchildren, their eyes glued to tablets and smartphones. Gregory strode in wearing an expensive charcoal suit, his confident stride and perfectly coiffed hair radiating authority. "As you all know," he began, "we're hosting our annual client appreciation event this Friday. Frankly, last year's event was boring as hell. This year needs to impress." His sharp eyes scanned the room. "We need entertainment that showcases Horizon's dynamism and forward-thinking approach." Various suggestions flew across the table. A DJ, a mixologist, a stand-up comedian. Margaret remained silent, focusing on taking detailed notes. Her penmanship had always been impeccable, a skill from a different era. "Oh, what about you, Margaret?" Gregory's voice cut through the room. All heads turned. "Sir," she asked, startled by the sudden attention, "any ideas for entertainment that isn't from the last century?" A few chuckles rippled through the room. Margaret cleared her throat. "Perhaps a jazz quartet? Many clients appreciate classic." "Wait," Gregory interrupted, a smirk playing on his lips. "I just remembered. Didn't your resume mention something about music?" Years ago, when applying for the administrative position, Margaret had included her community college music classes under education. It had been so long, she'd almost forgotten. "I took some piano lessons in my youth," she admitted quietly. Gregory's smile widened. "Perfect. We have that old piano in the lobby that's just collecting dust. Margaret will provide our entertainment." The room fell silent. Margaret felt her cheeks flush. "But, sir, I haven't played in decades. I only took basic lessons." "Nonsense. It's settled." Gregory clapped his hands together. "Margaret at the piano. It'll be nostalgic." The meeting continued, but Margaret barely heard a word. Her hands trembled slightly as she gathered her notepad. She knew exactly what Gregory was doing, setting her up to fail. If she refused, he'd have cause to question her team spirit. If she played poorly, he'd have his entertainment at her expense. As she returned to her desk, the autumn rain turned into a downpour, mirroring the storm of emotions brewing inside her. The ancient upright piano in the lobby, a relic from when the building housed a music school, seemed to mock her as she passed. That evening, Margaret sat in her modest apartment on the north side of Chicago, surrounded by framed photos of a life well lived. Her late husband Richard smiled at her from their wedding picture, and her son Michael, with his family in Seattle, beamed from the mantelpiece. Classical music played softly from her old radio, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. She opened her bottom dresser drawer and pulled out a worn leather case. Inside was a stack of yellowed sheet music she hadn't looked at in years. Her fingers brushed against the notes, memories flooding back. Margaret hadn't told the whole truth at the meeting. She hadn't just taken some piano lessons. Music had once been her life, her passion. At 19, she had been accepted to Juilliard with a full scholarship. But then life intervened. Her father's illness, meeting Richard, starting a family. One detour led to another, and her dreams of concert halls faded into lullabies sung to her son. After Richard passed away 5 years ago, she'd taken the job at Horizon to make ends meet. Her modest pension wasn't enough, and though Michael offered to help, She valued her independence too much to accept. Margaret ran her fingers over the keys of the small keyboard she kept in her living room, a poor substitute for a real piano. The muscle memory remained, though her joints now protested movements that once came effortlessly. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Mom!" Michael's voice was warm. "How are you?" "I'm fine, sweetheart," she said, deciding not to worry him with her workplace troubles. "Emma made the honor roll again," he told her, pride evident in his voice as he spoke about his teenage daughter. "That's wonderful. She gets her brains from her grandmother." Margaret chuckled. As they talked, she found herself sharing the story of the upcoming event. Michael's indignation was immediate. "That's workplace harassment, Mom. You should report him." "And be the difficult old lady?" "No, thank you," she sighed. "Besides, what's the worst that could happen? I'll play chopsticks badly, and life will go on." After they hung up, Margaret turned back to her sheet music. A particular piece caught her eye: Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. Challenging, powerful, emotional. She'd performed it at her final recital before giving up her scholarship. Her fingers moved over the keyboard, stiff at first, then with increasing fluidity. Notes she hadn't played in decades gradually returned. Margaret practiced until midnight, until her neighbors politely knocked on the wall. She apologized and put the keyboard away, but her mind was racing. Gregory Thompson wanted a show. Perhaps it was time to give him one. The next morning, Margaret arrived at work early. The office was almost empty as she made her way to the lobby piano. She'd never paid it much attention before. An old Steinway upright, probably from the 1940s. Its wood dulled with age and neglect. Cautiously, she pressed a key. It was out of tune, but the action was still responsive. She played a few more notes, wincing at the discordant sounds. "Needs some love, doesn't it?" Margaret turned to find Hector, the building's maintenance man, watching her with a kind smile. "My cousin tunes pianos," he offered. "I could give him a call if you'd like." "Would you?" Margaret asked, relief washing over her. "I'd be so grateful." By Thursday, word had spread throughout the office about Margaret's upcoming performance. She overheard snippets of conversation, saw the smirks and sideways glances. Gregory had mentioned it several times in passing, each comment thinly veiled in false encouragement. "Don't forget to practice, Margaret. We're all looking forward to your talents." The piano, now tuned thanks to Hector's cousin, stood ready in the lobby. During lunch breaks and after hours, Margaret practiced when she thought no one was listening. Her fingers grew more confident with each session, though arthritis made certain passages challenging. On Thursday afternoon, Tricia approached her desk with a concerned expression. "Margaret, I think it's awful what Mr. Thompson is doing," she whispered, glancing around to ensure no one overheard. "Some of us were talking. If you want to call in sick tomorrow, we'll back you up." Margaret patted the young woman's hand. "Thank you, dear, but I'll be just fine." After work, Margaret made a special trip to a small boutique she'd passed countless times but never entered. An hour later, she emerged with a garment bag and a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. That night, she practiced until her fingers ached, then soaked them in warm water with Epsom salts. She'd chosen her piece carefully. Nothing too showy, but something with depth, something that spoke to her journey. Friday morning arrived with clear skies and crisp autumn air. Margaret spent extra time on her appearance, applying makeup with care and styling her hair. When she arrived at work, she carried the garment bag to the ladies' Rein-Zuatiban room and changed into her new outfit. The day passed in a blur of anticipation. At 5:30, employees began transforming the office for the event. By 6:00, clients started arriving: investment bankers, corporate lawyers, wealthy individuals whose portfolios Horizon managed. Gregory made his rounds, champagne in hand, charm on full display. His eyes widened slightly when he spotted Margaret, no longer in her usual modest attire, but wearing an elegant navy blue evening dress with a subtle sparkle. Her silver hair was swept up in a classic chignon. "Margaret," he said, recovering quickly, "almost time for your big moment. Nervous?" "Not at all," she replied calmly. At 7:30, Gregory clinked his glass to gather everyone's attention. The crowd of about 60 people quieted. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. Horizon Financial Group values your business and your trust. He paused for applause. For tonight's entertainment, we have our own Margaret Wilson at the piano. Margaret has been with Horizon for, well, longer than some of you have been alive. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. Margaret stood, smoothing her dress, and made her way to the piano as Gregory continued. Margaret insisted on sharing her musical talents with us tonight. Let's give her our full attention, shall we? His tone carried the unmistakable expectation of amusement at her expense. Margaret sat at the piano, adjusted the bench, and took a deep breath. The room waited, most with drinks in hand, anticipating a brief, awkward performance before returning to their conversation. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The opening notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune filled the lobby. Margaret's fingers moved across the keys with practiced precision, coaxing a delicate, shimmering melody from the old Steinway. The gentle arpeggios floated above the hushed crowd, creating an atmosphere of unexpected beauty. Near the bar, Gregory's smirk faded into confusion. This was not the fumbling performance he had anticipated. Margaret's back was straight, her movements graceful and assured. The piece progressed, building in emotion and complexity, her interpretation both technically proficient and deeply personal. Conversations ceased entirely. Phones were lowered. All eyes turned to the elderly woman at the piano, witnessing the transformation of someone they had overlooked, someone they had dismissed. As Margaret reached the climax of the piece, her heart swelled with emotions long suppressed: pride, vindication, and the pure joy of reconnecting with her first love. The music spoke of moonlight and memories, of dreams deferred but not forgotten. Her arthritis was forgotten as muscle memory and passion carried her through the challenging passages. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of profound silence. Then, applause erupted. Not polite, perfunctory clapping, but genuine appreciation. Several clients rose to their feet. Margaret stood and offered a modest bow, her cheeks flushed with exertion and emotion. As she turned to leave the piano, Gregory approached, his expression unreadable. "He toots, Margaret. I had no idea," he said, loud enough for nearby clients to hear. "That was exceptional." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," she replied evenly. "I'm glad you enjoyed it." Before he could respond, clients surrounded Margaret, peppering her with questions and compliments. "Oh, where did you study? Do you perform regularly? That was absolutely beautiful." Among them was Eleanor Blackwood, one of Horizon's wealthiest clients, elegant in her 70s, with a reputation for directness. "My dear," Eleanor said, taking Margaret's hand, "you play with such feeling. How long have you worked at Horizon?" "Almost 6 years now," Margaret replied. "And they have you answering phones?" Eleanor shot a pointed look at Gregory. "Ha! What a waste of talent." As the evening continued, Margaret found herself the center of attention. She shared abbreviated stories of her musical background, careful not to overshadow the event's purpose. Several clients exchanged business cards with her, including a board member from the Chicago Symphony Orchestra's community outreach program. Across the room, Gregory observed the scene with mixed emotion. Been try for forwards. The entertainment had been a success, far beyond his expectations, but not in the way he had intended. The power dynamic had shifted, and he knew it. Later, as the event wound down, Tricia approached Margaret with shining eyes. "That was amazing. Why didn't you tell anyone you could play like that?" Margaret smiled. "No one ever asked, dear." As she gathered her belongings at the end of the night, Gregory appeared at her desk. "Now we should talk about your role here at Horizon," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "My office, Monday morning at 9. Margaret nodded, maintaining her composure. Whatever came next, dismissal, reassignment, or an insincere apology, she had reclaimed something precious. For one perfect evening, she had been Margaret Wilson, pianist, not just Margaret Wilson, aging administrative assistant. She left the building with her head high, the autumn night wrapping around her like an old friend. The weekend passed in a whirlwind of activity. Margaret's phone rang more in those 2 days than it had in the previous month. First was Michael, eager to hear about the event. When she described the evening, his "I told you so" was tempered with genuine pride. "You should record yourself playing Mom." Emma would love to see her grandmother perform. Then came calls from colleagues, Tricia, accounting's Tim Rogers, even shy Nadia from HR, all expressing admiration and, in some cases, apologies for underestimating her. Most surprising was Eleanor Blackwood's call on Sunday afternoon. "Margaret, I hope you don't mind. I got your number from that lovely receptionist. I've been thinking about your playing and your situation at Horizon." They spoke for nearly an hour. Eleanor, it turned out, had been a patron of the arts for decades and sat on several boards across Chicago. Monday morning arrived with steel-gray skies threatening snow. Early, even for Chicago, Margaret dressed with care in her best business attire, a charcoal pantsuit she reserved for special occasions. Whatever Gregory had planned, she would face it with dignity. The office hummed with activity when she arrived. Several colleagues greeted her warmly, a marked change from the polite indifference of before. At precisely 9, she knocked on Gregory's door. "Come in," he called. His office was intimidating by design. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. Modern furniture in black and chrome. Abstract art selected to impress rather than inspire. Gregory gestured to a chair across from his desk. "But Margaret, thank you for coming." She sat, hands folded in her lap, waiting. "Friday's event was our most successful client appreciation night to date," he began. "Several clients specifically mentioned your performance." "I'm glad they enjoyed it," she replied evenly. Gregory leaned forward. "Let me be direct. When I suggested you play, I didn't expect that level of skill. I made assumptions based on your age and position that were clearly incorrect." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more than she'd expected. "I've been reviewing your personnel file," he continued. "Your attention to detail, your perfect attendance record, your institutional knowledge. These are valuable assets to Horizon." Margaret remained silent, sensing there was more to come. "I've decided to create a new position, Client Relations Coordinator. The role would involve organizing client events, maintaining our most important relationships, representing Horizon at cultural functions. It comes with a significant raise and more flexible hours." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a formal offer letter with a salary nearly double her current one. "Why?" she asked simply. Gregory had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Several reasons. Your performance showed me qualities I hadn't recognized, and frankly, Eleanor Blackwood made it clear that how we treat our senior employees reflects on our company values." So there it was. Not a moral awakening, but a business calculation. Still, it was an opportunity. "I'll need time to consider your offer," Margaret said, closing the folder. "Of course. Take until Wednesday." Gregory stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "And Margaret, the piano is yours to use anytime." Apparently, it improves office morale. As she left his office, Margaret felt oddly conflicted. The validation was satisfying, but part of her wondered if she wanted to remain at Horizon at all. The weekend had awakened possibilities long dormant. At her desk, an email waited from the Chicago Symphony Orchestra's community program, an invitation to discuss potential involvement in their senior music initiative. Another message was from a piano teacher at a nearby community college, asking if she would consider taking on a few advanced students. Doors were opening, not closing. At 68, Margaret Wilson was discovering that final chapters could contain unexpected beginning. 3 months later, on a bright February morning, Margaret sat at the grand piano in the community room of the Lakeside Senior Center. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the circle of elderly faces watching her demonstrate hand position. "Remember, relaxation is key," she explained, demonstrating the gentle, curved position. "Even with arthritis, we can still create beautiful music. Her twice-weekly piano classes for seniors had quickly become the center's most popular program. Many participants had played in their youth but, like Margaret, had set aside their musical aspirations for careers and family. Others were beginners, finally pursuing a long-held interest. After accepting Gregory's offer, Margaret had negotiated a reduced schedule, 3 days at Horizon, allowing time for her growing musical commitment. The arrangement suited everyone. Client events had improved dramatically under her guidance, and her presence at cultural functions throughout Chicago had strengthened Horizon's community standing. Eleanor Blackwood had become both mentor and friend, introducing Margaret to her extensive network in Chicago's arts community. Through Eleanor's connections, Margaret now served as a consultant for the Symphony's Music for Life program, designing curriculum for older adults returning to music. As her class ended, Margaret noticed a young woman waiting by the door, Emma, her granddaughter, home from college for the weekend. "That was amazing, Grandma," Emma said as they embraced. At 18, she was a striking combination of Margaret's features and Michael's height. "Those people adore you." "They adore music," Margaret corrected gently. "I'm just opening the door." They walked together to a nearby cafe, a weekly tradition when Emma was in town. Over chai lattes, Emma updated Margaret on her pre-med studies and campus life. "Dad told me you're thinking about moving to a new apartment," Emma said. Margaret nodded. "My lease is up in April. I'm considering a place closer to downtown, with better public transportation. The commute to all my activities is getting complicated. And there's a piano in the building's common room," Emma added with a knowing smile. "That, too," Margaret admitted. After lunch, they strolled through Millennium Park, bundled against the winter chill. The conversation turned to Emma's upcoming summer break. "I was thinking," Margaret began cautiously, "perhaps we could take that trip to New York we've talked about. I have some business at Juilliard in June. They've invited me to speak at a symposium on lifelong musical education." Emma's eyes widened. "Juilliard? Grandma, that's incredible!" Back at her apartment, after Emma left, Margaret sat at her keyboard, now upgraded to a digital piano with weighted keys, a gift from Michael's family last Christmas. The sheet music before her was challenging. She was preparing for a small recital at the Cultural Center next month, her first formal performance in decades. Her phone chimed with a text from Gregory. "Client asking about you for their daughter's wedding. Interested? Details Monday." Margaret smiled. Her relationship with Gregory had evolved into something resembling mutual respect. He valued her contributions, and she appreciated his willingness to adapt, though she suspected Eleanor's continued influence played no small part in his transformation. As evening fell over Chicago, Margaret played Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major C, the piece that had been playing on her radio the night she decided to reclaim her passion. Her fingers moved surely across the keys, occasionally stiffening but never failing her. The music filled her small living room, a testament to resilience and rediscovery. In 3 weeks, she would perform at the Cultural Center. In June, she would visit Juilliard, not as the student she once was, but as a woman who had found her way back to music through an unexpected path. And in between, she would continue building this new life, rich with purpose and possibility. Margaret Wilson, once marginalized for her age, had transformed humiliation into triumph. The music that had always lived within her now flowed outward, touching lives across generations. At 68, she had not found a final act, but a new beginning. Proof that talent never truly fades, and that it's never too late to become who you might have been. The notes of the nocturne lingered in the air long after her fingers left the keys, a melody of second chances, playing on